Good afternoon to you. 406 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up, Jason Isaac with the American Energy Institute reacts to Chris Wright, the incoming Secretary of Energy, undergoing his confirmation hearing today. And Tom Fitton is here from Judicial Watch. That's at 5 o'clock as we talk about Pam Bondi getting feisty, the incoming Attorney General. Can't wait to get to that. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL.
If the deal isn't done before I take office, which is now going to be 2 weeks, all hell will break out in the Middle East.
If the deal's not done. Today, a breakthrough of some kind, as the Israeli government and Hamas have agreed to a deal to pause fighting in Gaza in exchange for human beings, some 33 hostages that were taken from Israel during the attacks of October 7th of 2023, set to be released, some of them not alive. They say that some of these will be bodies. Meanwhile, the Israelis are expected to, in return, release a lot, hundreds is what I'm seeing, of prisoners back into Gaza. For more on this and how good this deal is and the role President Trump played in all of it, I want to bring in Gabriel Noronha now, Executive Director of Polaris National Security, former State Department advisor on Iran. Gabriel, good to have you back with us.
Hey, always a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's just start with the deal as you understand it. What was achieved here?
So this is a 3-phase deal. We're about to start phase 1. It's going to be a 6-week process before phase 2 would even start if we get there at all. So on the Israeli side, again, they're going to release over time a large number of Palestinian prisoners, and Hamas is going to release 33 hostages. Now, as you mentioned, some of those are bodies, and their families have been eagerly waiting their bodies, and so it is important that even though we wish there were more alive hostages being returned, that the return of bodies is closure for those families. This is going to happen gradually, so it's going to be hostages and prisoners released every few days on a schedule, hopefully for the first 42 days, and then phase 2 starts, which still needs to be fully negotiated. There's contours of that plan, but a lot of the final details have to be worked out in the next 6 weeks, and that would lead to a more permanent end to the war.
Do you envision a scenario where Hamas releases all of the remaining hostages here? Because clearly they're still holding on to hostages to use as human shields. And my guess is they don't want to give that up.
You know, what they're looking for in exchange for return of those last hostages is a total end to the war and a release of almost all Palestinian prisoners. They're looking for total aid reconstruction of Gaza. And one of the more controversial things is they're ultimately trying to negotiate basically their survival as a political party and military movement existing in Gaza. And so again, as it goes from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3,
yes,
you get more of the hostages out, but you get much more difficult pills for Israel to be able to swallow.
How did President Trump's reelection change the math in all of this?
So this deal, a version of this deal has been on the table since May, and Hamas wasn't willing to do it because they weren't getting pressured. When President Trump won, and when he said there will be hell to pay if Hamas does not agree to this, Hamas looked at that and realized that they needed to negotiate. And what we saw in the last few days was reports coming out that Hamas made significant concessions to get their way to a yes on this deal. Again, it was that backstop of January 20th of Trump saying, if you want to negotiate with me, it's going to be much, much worse for you. And ultimately, Hamas decided, we're going to do a deal before we get there. And that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
President Trump's team worked really closely with President Biden's team on this, real partners on this. It's been a good transition from everything we're hearing. And that's the ingredient that allowed this deal to happen.
On the Israeli side, it seems like the only way you would accept an arrangement like this is if you credibly believed that your security is going to be enhanced going forward into the future.
I don't think they believe that, but it's a trade-off. if you talk to Israelis, they'll say, we understand that getting our hostages home means we have to give something in return, and that something is very painful. But for the families that have, had been separated from their loved ones for over 400 days, they're sort of saying, look, we just need them back home.
Yes.
And we'll deal with the problems that come down the road later. But in terms of political pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu and others, it's simply the view that there has to be a deal made to get them back, no matter what the price is.
But
now,
if you're
not everyone agrees with that in Israel, but that's the view for some.
Yeah, and I noticed, I've seen, I was reading earlier Michael Oren's coverage today, his assessment of all of this, and the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, and he was kind of breaking down the domestic politics of this. A lot of the more left-leaning Israelis have wanted to come to a quicker resolution here, and the right-leaning Israelis, to the extent that we can use American descriptions of all of this, have really wanted to eradicate Hamas and get rid of that ever-looming threat of these terror attacks, so no more October 7th could occur at all. But I imagine, Gabriel Noronha, that if you're Netanyahu, if you're any Israeli, you've got to be happier having President Trump as the incoming United States president rather than a guy like Joe Biden who, kind of repeats on a frequent basis the word don't. And then, of course, every adversary around the planet ignores him.
I could not tell you how many Israelis have come up to me in the last 2 months and just said, we are so happy. We might not say it publicly, but we are so, so, so thrilled to have President Trump come in because they know that they're not going to get insulted. They're not going to have criticism about their war of survival. And they believe that the outcomes are simply going to be better. And so, almost every Israeli I've talked to is thrilled. I think this outcome, again, not everyone's going to love it, but it's something that the Israeli government, which again is a pretty conservative government, has said is in the Israeli national interest. And I think that's what matters. Matters a little bit less what the United States thinks. Matters a lot more of what does Israel say? Is this a good deal for us?
Yeah. But the role that America plays in terms of providing important capabilities, I think, is important. I was talking earlier about October 7th and kind of scrutinizing how that could occur. Obviously, Hamas conducts the attack, but whatever intelligence failures or insecurity may have existed in the region that allowed it, that's obviously deserving of good scrutiny. And the role of the United States intelligence community in all of this. Like, what kind of picture did the Biden administration have of all of this? What failures led to such a horrific terror attack taking place in the first place? And what does it mean to have President Trump and company now in charge, a more competent set in charge of some of these really important resources?
I think a lot of it was on full display in the Senate this morning at John Ratcliffe's hearing to get confirmed as CIA director. And he was saying, look, the CIA's number one focus needs to be on providing the best intelligence possible to the U.S. government. And in the past 2 years, it was sidelined from that. I'm not going to say that their number one mission was DEI, but they took their ball off the key threats, and they were paying attention and diverting resources to things like climate change, to things that just weren't as high a priority as this should have been. And they really had an ideological blind spot about the threat from Iran and its terror proxies, that they diverted resources away from it and moved them elsewhere. And that's one of the reasons that we missed October 7th. Israel also missed it, so it's a lot of blame to go around.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful that with John Ratcliffe at the CIA, some reforms coming in the Israeli system, will be on the front edge of this now.
President Trump, in his statement today, celebrating the deal as epic and certainly giving credit to his envoy, special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, for playing an essential role in negotiating some of this, all of it. You've got he says that when the Trump administration comes back into place, that they're going to work to, quote, further expand the historic Abraham Accords in order to bring some more stability to the region. How important do you think those bilateral arrangements are between Arab states and Israel in terms of creating some of that peace so we don't have to return to this place?
Look, there are over 30 countries right now, mostly in the Arab and Muslim world, that refuse to recognize Israel's existence. They don't allow Israeli travelers. And as part of that, when you say as a government policy that Israel is sort of an enemy, it creates a permissive environment for terrorism. It creates a permissive environment for hate. And so the more of these deals we can get, it's going to do three things. It's going to benefit the Israeli public and their economy because they'll be able to travel and move forward. It'll help their political situation by stabilizing and removing terrorists in the Arab states. And it's going to help the United States because the last thing we want is more troops on the ground in the Middle East. If we can create the conditions for peace between the Israelis and Arabs, it's going to lead to a massive flourishing of peace that we can use as a peace dividend and reinvest elsewhere. So diplomacy doesn't cost that much, and it can yield really big dividends. I'm very confident. Steve Witkoff, he's a businessman. He gets there on the job, and a month later we've got a hostage deal. So that's a really good portend of things to come.
There are 3 American hostages who are still believed to be alive and held by Hamas right now. And they are not expected to be among the first 33 hostages who are released. Instead, those first 33, we mentioned some of them are not alive. Some of these will be bodies. But among the people who are alive, we're expecting the elderly, the infirmed, people who are kind of in very dire straits, and babies, for that matter, among the 33. How long will it be until we can get these Americans released, and how focused do you think the Trump administration is going to be on that effort?
So if things go well, and if there can be a strong deal negotiated, we're talking 6 weeks from now. That's when the phase 2 would come in and we can get those high value targets. Hamas understands that Americans are really valuable, and these are, young men. They're hopefully still healthy. And so they're going to be the most valuable assets for Hamas. Again, I am hopeful 6 weeks from now we can get them back. I think I probably came on your program over a year ago and said this is going to be one of the most difficult challenges, one of the most difficult hostage deals that's ever been negotiated.
Yes.
Just because of all the complicated dynamics. So I'm hopeful. It's going to be a tough uphill battle.
And what are the tripwires for Hamas? Like what do they have to do for this deal to be considered null and void, or for some big reaction to occur?
The big one is if they still try to hit Israeli targets. If they, this is a ceasefire that goes both ways. Most of the, leftist activists are talking about wanting Israel to stop their military operations, but Hamas has been digging tunnels and been trying to rearm, and they've been firing at Israeli security patrols left and right. So there's a question of discipline. Is Hamas willing to forego their violence against Israelis for 6 weeks? And I think a key question for Israel is, what do they see Hamas doing? Are they reconstituting? Are they building more terror tunnels? Are they trying to smuggle in more weapons?
Yes.
If that's the sign that the Israelis get, they're going to say, why are we going towards, a permanent end to the war if we're just going to have to deal with another October 7th a few years from now?
Great. That's such an important question. And then finally, to what extent can Hamas even control some of maybe the young men who are in the region and slow them down? I'm seeing right now that the so-called Gaza Civil Defense, Hamas controls everything in Gaza, is calling on residents in Gaza to refrain from firing celebratory gunfire as a result of this deal. And in fact, they say they're concerned that some of the bullets will fall from the air and hit people in Gaza. They don't want any more people dying as a result of celebratory gunfire. In other words, they're dealing with some very out of control people, Gabriel Noronha. Can they keep people in line here?
That's an important question. Their ability to have command and control has been severely degraded. That was one of the most important and first tasks of the IDF in this whole operation. Now, this is also something that Hamas is going to try to use as a shield, where it can say, oh, well, we didn't order this.
Yes.
We didn't know. We're not responsible. And so my view is always, you make Hamas responsible. You make these terror groups take responsibility, and they're the ones that have to police their members. If they believe that that's their key to survival, you can bet that they're willing to get their folks in line.
Yeah, they'll do whatever they need to. All right, Gabriel Noronha, thank you, from Polaris National Security, former State Department advisor on Iran under the Trump administration. Great to talk to you today, sir. Coringe did a press briefing today. I thought she was supposed to already have completed her last one. I guess the news today was so big she needed to come out and do a press briefing. She was wearing a lovely lime green dress, and she offered no information of value whatsoever today. That's the summary on it. In fact, Jackie Heinrich at the Fox News Channel tweets a photo of Coringe flapping her gums, saying, "Zero news made in KJP's final briefing. She had no details on the ceasefire/hostage deal that will end 400 days of fighting, a defining element of Biden's presidency, instead directing reporters to an NSC background call, National Security Council. Sources familiar with the situation tell me that Coringe blocked John Kirby from briefing the press on the ceasefire, wanting to keep the spotlight to herself." Good. So instead of an adult press briefing today, we got a kids press briefing. It's a gigantic waste of time. Andrew is calling in from Harper's Ferry, line 2, wants to weigh in on this emerging deal today. Andrew, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Vince. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
You know, what's dumbfounded me about this whole thing is Trump has basically tied his wagon to Biden's policy and making sure that, 1, Hamas will not be defeated, 2, Israel cannot win a war, and 3, proving we don't know how to win a war anymore. The whole situation was created by the Biden administration funding Iran.
Yeah.
By holding Israel's arms tied behind its back, by forcing them to give aid to the enemy that was told. We're not going to see these Americans back. They're not even on the list for the second part of the negotiation. It's estimated out of Israel that less than 30 people are still alive. And this is the agreement we come up with Hamas, giving them a position to basically wake up after this and be back on October 6th, allowing themselves to rebuild. This is shameful.
All right, Andrew, thank you. I'm glad you got a chance to weigh in here. Yeah, and Andrew's speaking for a lot of people, very concerned about this. I think it's not going to end up being a more secure situation. We await remarks from President Trump on this. I assume we're going to hear from him at some point. He thinks that the deal is going to be good, is going to be strong, that they are going to be able to secure the region against some of this vile behavior from Hamas, more of it. We'll see. We'll see. Keep praying and keep hoping, trusting in President Trump that he's going to bring about a peace, because that's what we all want. Coming up, Jason Isaac will be with us from the American Energy Institute. We'll talk about the state of energy in the country, as well as the incoming Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, doing his confirmation hearing before the Senate today. That's ahead. Good afternoon to you. 437 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Tom Fitton will join us at 5 o'clock. President of Judicial Watch. We'll talk to him about Pam Bondi, the incoming Attorney General of the United States, getting feisty today in the United States Senate, fighting back against awful senators like Whitehouse and Senator Adam Schiff. When did that happen? California makes a lot of bad decisions. That's one of the lessons of the era. You can join us 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. President Trump has a lot of nominees going through the confirmation process right now, including Chris Wright, who is the nominee to become the Secretary of Energy. If you're wondering who Chris Wright is, the New York Times describes him derisively as a longtime evangelist for fossil fuels, which sounds great to me. Can't wait to have that. Here's Chris Wright today testifying before the Senate.
I see 3 immediate tasks where I'll focus my attention if I get the privilege of being confirmed. The first is to unleash American energy at home and abroad to restore our energy dominance. The security of our nation begins with energy. Previous administrations have viewed energy as a liability instead of the immense national asset that it is. To compete globally, we must expand energy production, including commercial nuclear and liquefied natural gas, and cut the cost of energy for Americans. Second, we must lead the world in innovation and technology breakthroughs. Throughout my lifetime, technology and innovation have immeasurably enhanced the human condition. We must protect and accelerate the work of the department's national laboratory network to secure America's competitive advantage and its security. I commit to working with Congress on the important missions of the national laboratories. Third, We must build things in America again and remove barriers to progress. Federal policies today make it too easy to stop projects and very hard to start and complete projects.
Yeah, and the more cheap, abundant energy we have right here in the United States, the easier it will be to have all of those successful products made right here in the United States. For more on this, Jason Isaac joins us now, the CEO and founder of the American Energy Institute. Jason, good to have you with us, sir.
It's great to be on.
Chris Wright today testifying before the Senate. What do you think?
No, it was great. Chris, I've known Chris since 2018. He's a member of our trade organization. His company, Liberty Energy, is that we unabashedly support free markets and American energy. We're opposed to subsidies and these political agendas. I think Chris was great today talking about the abundance that comes from energy. And he's got a great remark that he talks about energy isn't part of the economy. It is the economy. It powers every single thing in our economy right now. It's led to our economic prosperity. And I think he understands that we're at the threat of deindustrialization here in the United States because of the climate alarmist agenda. You heard, I think my count was 6. We had 6 climate alarmist people suffering from eco-anxiety and depression get up and scream and interrupt the hearings today. But he understands that the key to human flourishing is access to affordable and reliable energy, something that he kept repeating over and over again: affordable, reliable, abundant energy. And we produce it more responsibly than anywhere on the planet right here in the United States.
And importantly, I guess, for the Democrats in the room, they kept trying to bring up, climate change and wind energy and solar and all these other things. Chris Wright kept on coming back to the point that I'm for everything. I'm for every form of energy we can possibly get going, but we have to have energy for Americans.
Yeah, and he wasn't as contentious as some of the other hearings are getting, where you've got headsets and it's going back and forth, and doing a great job of wearing a MAGA hat, if you will, channeling that persona of Donald Trump. Chris is not like that. He's very calm and collected, very methodical, just a brilliant scientist that has experience in the energy industry. And he again, I'm not a fan of the term all of the above energy policy, because all of the above includes things that are heavily subsidized that would not exist if it weren't for you and I being forced to use our dollars, our tax dollars, to prop up foreign-made wind and solar. But Chris kept coming back to affordable and reliable. And that comes from hydrocarbons and it comes from nuclear. And he specifically used the term hydrocarbons, and that's a messaging technique, because people that are opposed to American energy call it fossil fuels.
Yes.
And hydrocarbons is actually more well received in the general public. And so Chris knows that. And that's the scientific name of what it is, hydrocarbons.
Yeah.
And he understands that.
Well, fossil fuels, I mean, the word itself is designed to prejudice the listener into rejecting the use of energy. I mean, that's the whole point of the phrase fossil fuels. Like, oh, we're turning dinosaurs into oil, and it's like, no, that's not at all what's happening. But anyway, that's where we are. How important is the job of the Secretary of Energy when it comes to how things look in the future for the rest of us?
Well, I think this Secretary of Energy job is going to be extremely important, because you have, for the first time, a Secretary of Energy that has experience working in the energy space, that understands nuclear energy, geothermal. He talked about that today during his hearing, but obviously oil and gas. He understands hydrocarbons. This will be the first time ever. And so it's going to be not only important for the Department of Energy that he will lead, but it'll be an important voice in the cabinet for people that don't understand energy policy. My experience in the legislature in Texas, I was advised to become an expert on one or two key areas and focus on that. Then you will be who your colleagues look to for advice and wisdom and counsel in those areas. Right. And that's what I focused on: energy and the environment. We're world leaders of producing both incredible things here in the United States. We're environmental leaders, and that's Chris's background, and he will be that expert in the cabinet when it comes to energy questions.
President Trump made it a commitment during the campaign, or at least made it a projection during the campaign, that he'd be able to cut gas prices in particular in half over the course of the next year, beginning on Inauguration Day. That seems ambitious to me. What is possible for the President of the United States, the Secretary of Energy, to do, and how much can they bring down the cost of energy?
Yeah, they really can, and it's market signals. When President Biden signaled that he was going to pause LNG liquefaction terminals here in the United States, what happened within weeks, and this happened last year in a couple of places, places like Qatar announced the expansion of an existing LNG export terminal so they could supply gas to Europe and to other places around the world. So as soon as the president signaled that we were closed for exporting LNG, money moved somewhere else. And now we have a new administration that is very pro-American energy. And that is sending signals to the market. We're going to see an incredible investment in exporting liquefied natural gas. We need to be using more coal in this country. We mine it, we produce it more responsibly than anywhere on the planet. And that's where China is kicking our tails. They are opening a new coal-fired power plant every single week to provide affordable and reliable electricity for Chinese. It's fueling their industry. They're exporting energy for the first time ever. They're exporting diesel fuel, jet fuel, home heating oil, things that we export, and we should be flooding the market with American energy.
Yes.
I just wish the Chinese cared about pollution control technology. They could care less about that, or human rights.
Well, that's the point that I wanted to bring up about China, because Americans are buying all of these products from China, including a lot of lefties who claim they care so much about pollution, and yet China is just absolutely wreaking havoc on the environment. Meanwhile, in the United States, we have the technological know-how and the concern about getting this energy out for as cheaply and efficiently as possible while simultaneously protecting our valuable environment.
Yeah, the Chinese are laughing all the way to the bank with a Green New scam. I mean, they really are, because all of their products are made and dependent completely on China. We're reducing our dependence on the energy that we produce right here, and littering the land with wind and solar that takes up thousands of acres compared to that of natural gas and coal and nuclear for electric generation. It's like 75 times more land is required for wind. It's 30 to 40 times more land is required for sun, for solar, to produce an equivalent amount of electricity as nuclear, and that's when the weather is cooperating. So we've got incredible resources here in the United States. We need to be tapping into them to bring manufacturing back. I've had the opportunity to testify in front of Congress 4 times now, and I've said, of all the technology the Chinese steal from us, it would be nice if they would utilize our pollution control technology. They don't, and it's something that people don't understand. And I've had staff in the U.S. Capitol laugh in my face when I've said, we've reduced pollution nearly 80% over the last 5 decades. We're world leaders in clean air. Mm-hmm. We're number one when it comes to access to clean and safe drinking water. And staff did not believe me. And I'm like, this is information from data at the Environmental Protection Agency, at the World Health Organization. We have all these air quality monitors. We know this. This is factual information. Their minds were blown. People are being scared here in this country, and it's being driven by the Chinese and the Russians. And it's really unfortunate, but I think Chris will be a fresh voice in the Department of Energy.
So in addition to all of the economic advantages that come from this, of course, there's the national security component. China very much plays a role there. I've got some audio here. This is Chris Wright today talking to Democrat Senator Catherine Cortez Masto about national security and the importance that energy plays in that.
Understanding of DOE's role in defense and national security today.
Oh, it is essential. The NNSA, as a part of DOE, is the critical designer, maintainer, and builder through contractors of our nation's nuclear arsenal. This is the ultimate guarantor of our sovereignty. I take that responsibility very seriously. Together with the coming instabilities in our electrical grid, it is my single biggest concern in this job.
I mean, energy very intertwined with national security. You heard it there, just the grid concerns and the ability for Americans to stay online and have power, the ability to produce the energy that we consume here, the ability to keep our adversaries from enriching themselves from their own energy reserves and to use that money then to power their war machines. National security seems like it's front and center, Sir Jason Isaac, as we deal with this.
Yeah, and Chris knows that he's talking about the National Nuclear Security Administration, part of the Department of Energy, that he'll have the responsibility of overseeing. It's about half of the budget of the Department of Energy, but he understands that protecting that critical stockpile of nuclear weaponry and nuclear energy is incredibly important. And I think the public perception is changing on nuclear-generated electricity, and I think it's going to advance significantly under his leadership. And that's going to be incredible because we need more nuclear, we need more coal, we need more natural gas for electric generation to power an economy. That will truly cut costs. Unfortunately, as we found out the hard way in Texas, with now over 40% of our grid being these unreliable, weather-dependent, Chinese-made variable sources of generation, our costs are increasing and our reliability is decreasing significantly. People have PTSD around the country because they're worried when we have cold spells. When wind and solar don't perform, are we going to have enough electricity? People are having to stockpile it. The sale of generators are skyrocketing. Energy is becoming more expensive because of the parasites on the grid. That's wind and solar. And Chris understands that to have a leading economy, we have to have affordable and reliable energy. And again, that comes from hydrocarbons and nuclear. And I'm just so excited that he is going to be a proponent of that.
I love it. All right. Jason Isaac with the American Energy Institute. Sir, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate that.
Thanks for having me on, Vince.
Of course. That's Jason. All right. Now, a lot of nominees today testifying before the United States Senate. Among them, we also had Sean Duffy, the Transportation Secretary nominee. Here he is giving his vision for the Transportation Department.
If confirmed as Secretary of Transportation, what would you want you and your administration's legacy to be when it comes to transportation and infrastructure?
I appreciate the question, Senator. That I had a legacy of improving safety. I had a legacy of working with this committee, but specifically Senator Cantwell, to make sure we get Boeing back on track, producing great airplanes that are safe airplanes. And also, as President Trump has charged, building the big infrastructure projects that connect this country, without forgetting, by the way, rural America that uses that incredibly important infrastructure. But those three things, I'd like to be a legacy from a tenure as the Secretary of Transportation.
That's a big one. Safety, getting Boeing back on track, that's a huge job, isn't it? Building infrastructure, and don't forget rural America. That sounds like a lot better than whatever Pete Buttigieg was doing. The roads are racist. All right, I'm going to go on paternity leave. I'll see you in 6 months. What was that entire tenure from Pete Buttigieg? Give me Sean Duffy any day of the week. All right, so that was Sean Duffy. John Ratcliffe being considered for the Central Intelligence Agency today, and here's what he said.
Confirm my leadership at CIA will focus on setting and communicating priorities and demanding relentless execution. Above all, will be a strict adherence to the CIA's mission. We will collect intelligence, especially human intelligence, in every corner of the globe, no matter how dark or difficult. We will produce insightful, objective, all-source analysis, never allowing political or personal biases to cloud our judgment or infect our products.
Ooh.
We will conduct covert action at the direction of the president, going places no one else can go and doing things no one else can do. To the brave CIA officers listening around the world, if all of this sounds like what you signed up for, then buckle up and get ready to make a difference. If it doesn't, then it's time to find a new line of work.
John Ratcliffe trying to get the CIA back to the business of spying on our adversaries, collecting information, informing the President of the United States in order to help him make wise decisions, instead of targeting the American people. A lot more ahead. We've got Tom Fitton joining us in just moments. We'll talk about Pam Bondi in the hot seat today to become the next Attorney General. And she was able to give it even better than she got it today as she goes back at some of these crazy Democrats.